For centuries, Norway stood as a proud bastion of the old Norse faith, where the names of Thor and Odin were spoken with reverence. The Norse Vikings called upon the gods for strength, courage, and fortune in war. But by the 10th century, the winds of change began to stir. Norway's kings and noble elites, whether driven by political ambition or the promise of greater legitimacy, slowly turned their gaze toward Christianity. Yet amid this turning of the tide, one man rose in defiance, and that was Haakon the Powerful, a warrior of unyielding spirit and unwavering belief who would refuse to kneel. While others bent before the cross, he stood tall beneath the hammer of Thor. The History of Norway describes him as the last champion of paganism upon the throne of Norway. He was a man of great natural talent, fearless yet prudent, formidable in battle, and in his earlier years, justly popular for his generosity and fair rule. It was Haakon who seized the throne of Norway from the lineage of Harald Fairhair, taking power from a once unshakable dynasty. The History of Norway describes Haakon as gaining a power far beyond that of any of his ancestors. The Heimskringla, which was the great saga of the Norse kings, dedicates an entire chapter to his life and deeds, even though he never crowned himself king. Poets and skalds sang of his countless victories in battle, but above all, they praised his steadfast devotion to the old gods. One skald sang this of his deeds: Haakon the Earl, so good and wise, let all the ancient temples rise. Thor's temples raised with fostering hand, that had been ruined through the land. His valiant champions who were slain, on battlefields across the main. To Thor the thunder god may tell, how for the gods all turns out well. The hardy warrior now once more, offers the sacrifice of gore. The shield bearer in Loki's game, invokes once more great Odin's name. The Earl has conquered with strong hand all that lies north of Viking land. In battle storm and iron rain, Haakon spreads his sword's domain. While others faltered, Haakon stood firm, a lone champion of the ancient ways, in a land swiftly succumbing to Christian rule. He did not merely resist change, he fought to preserve the soul of a pagan Norway. This is the tale of the warrior who overthrew the House of Fairhair. This is the story of the last great Norse pagan. Haakon, later known as Haakon the Powerful, was born in around the year 937 into the House of Lade. He was the son of Sigurd Haakonsson, the mighty Jarl of Lade and the ruler of the vast northern realms of Trondelag and Hålogaland. The Jarls of Lade was second only to the kings of Norway themselves in power and prestige, a status owed not merely to noble blood, but to their control over Trondelag, a region of great fertility and immense economic importance to northern Europe. The chronicler Adam of Bremen claimed that Haakon's lineage traced back to Ivar, either Ivar the Boneless or the legendary Ivar Vidfamne, both legendary Viking kings in their own right, and even suggested that he descended from a race of giants. The sagas went further still. Haakon was said to be born of Odin's blood, a scion of divine ancestry. During the Viking Age, rulers and kings were often linked to the gods. Due to this, they were thought to be favoured in battle and hold divine power. Haakon's early life unfolded under the reign of Haakon the Good, the first Christian king of Norway and a son of Harald Fairhair. During this time, Haakon's father, Jarl Sigurd, held great influence as a close friend and advisor to the king. Sigurd played a delicate role, striving to mediate between Haakon the Good and the fiercely pagan populace, as the king introduced Christianity to the land. But even divine favour and royal goodwill could not shield the kingdom from the storm that was about to come. The History of Norway remembers Haakon in glowing terms. A man splendidly equipped in body and mind. He was a great warrior, handsome in person, wise, resolute, and affable in his demeanour. His family was, in some respects, as noble as any king's, for he belonged to the ancient tribal aristocracy that had ruled Trondelag since the earliest Germanic times. It is even said that when Haakon was born, King Haakon the Good himself was present and poured water over the infant's head, bestowing upon him his own name. According to one account, when Haakon was but 15 years old, he had an illegitimate son named Erik Haakonsson. This would cement his legacy in a number of ways, as Erik would later aid his father in battle. In the Heimskringla it states, Earl Haakon was much addicted to women and had many children. His second most famous son was Svein Haakonsson, and he also had another 2 sons named Sigurd and Erling. The heirs of Harald Fairhair, ambitious and ruthless, soon rose in defiance of Haakon the Good. The king fell in the Battle of Hjörungavágr, slain by the forces of his own nephew Harald Greycloak. With Haakon the Good dead, Harald Greycloak and his brothers declared themselves kings, yet their authority barely reached beyond the western coasts. Desperate to consolidate power, they turned to bloodshed, seeking to eliminate all rival claimants and powerful men, including the Jarls of Lade. In the year 962, the treachery of Harald Greycloak reached its height. While attending a feast, Sigurd Haakonsson was ambushed and burned alive while still inside his longhall. Word of his father's murder reached Haakon, who then was a young man of about 25 years old. What followed would alter the course of Norway's history. Upon learning of his father's fate, Haakon summoned the people of Trondelag. The response was overwhelming. A great multitude gathered, united in grief and fury, demanding vengeance against Harald Greycloak and his treacherous kin. Haakon did not immediately march to war. Instead, he began by refusing to pay tribute to the self-proclaimed kings, a bold act of rebellion. Skirmishes followed, unnamed battles lost to time, each inconclusive yet fierce. But Haakon, through strength and strategy, held firm. Though Harald Greycloak bore the title of king, Haakon was no man's vassal. He ruled Trondelag with independence and defiance. Earl Haakon soon came to see the futility of his struggle against the kings of Norway, whose wars had brought his realm only sorrow and death. Thus he would travel to Denmark and ally himself with its king Harald Bluetooth. At that time, Bluetooth faced a troublesome demand from his nephew Gold Harald, nicknamed Gold for his numerous successful Viking raids, who insisted on sharing in the governance of Denmark. Trusting Haakon's wisdom, the king sought his counsel. The Earl saw in this dilemma a golden opportunity and did not hesitate to seize it. He advised Harald against killing his nephew, warning that such an act would provoke outrage and alienate a powerful faction in Denmark that favoured Gold Harald's claim to the throne. Instead, Haakon proposed a subtler path. Enlist Gold Harald to confront and eliminate Harald Greycloak and his brothers in Norway. As a reward, offer him the crown of Norway. In doing so, the king would rid himself of 2 threats: his power-hungry nephew Gold Harald, who in Haakon's mind should be satisfied with the crown of Norway, and the troublesome Harald Greycloak. This plan appealed to Harald Bluetooth, and after some hesitation, he found the resolve to act. Bluetooth sent a warm and flattering message to Harald Greycloak, inviting him to reclaim his old fief in Denmark, an offer sweetened by the promise of its revenues. Greycloak accepted, and sailed for Denmark with 3 ships and 240 men. But the invitation was a trap. As soon as he set foot on Danish soil, Gold Harald attacked, slaughtering him and nearly all of his warriors. But this was only the first act that Haakon had orchestrated. In the second, the Earl returned to King Harald and warned him that his nephew Gold Harald, now poised to become the King of Norway, might soon prove a greater threat than Greycloak had ever been. With blunt resolve, Haakon offered to eliminate him as well if the king would swear not to seek vengeance. In return, Haakon would ask to hold Norway in fief, acknowledging the Danish crown as its overlord. The proposal, ruthless yet shrewd, was deeply tempting to Harald Bluetooth. Like many weak men, he raised objections, only to have them talked away. Soon after the death of Harald Greycloak, Earl Haakon advanced upon Gold Harald with a host of warriors. Without delay, battle erupted. Haakon emerged victorious, and Gold Harald was taken captive. Wasting no time, the Earl ordered him to be hanged upon the gallows. With their rivals gone, Haakon and King Harald raised a great army and sailed to Norway. So complete was their design, so paralysed their enemies, that they seized the entire kingdom without the need to draw a sword. Thus, through political mastery, Earl Haakon, from an exiled earl, had just subjugated the whole of Norway and now had it under his dominion. Harald Greycloak had been a Christian, spending much time in Northumbria, as his father Eric Bloodaxe was its king. Greycloak has been portrayed as decimating the pagan population of Norway and destroying many of its temples in a cultural genocide. But Haakon championed the Norse gods, and as he travelled around Norway, he ordered that in all his lands the temples and sacrifices should be restored. According to the saga of the kings of Norway, when Haakon ruled, the seasons improved, and the Norse people finally had hope after years of famine. Due to this omen, this would further legitimize Haakon's rule of Norway. Yet, the Fairhair dynasty was not finished with Haakon. The brothers of the fallen King Harald Greycloak, King Rangfred, and King Gudrod, the last surviving sons of Queen Gunhild and Eric Bloodaxe, soon came to challenge Haakon. In the following year, Rangfred returned with a formidable fleet, bolstered by a host of Viking warriors who had rallied to his cause. He met Earl Haakon in battle, and though the clash proved indecisive, Rangfred succeeded in reclaiming 4 northwestern shires. For nearly a year, Haakon made no move to attack. It was not until the spring of the year 967 that Haakon, confident in his strength once more, took up arms. In the battle that followed, Rangfred and Gudrod were decisively defeated and forced into exile. According to the most reliable accounts, they sailed to Scotland, but continued for several years to harass the coast of Norway by sudden attacks. However, these attacks were all largely ineffective, and Haakon no longer regarded them as a threat. Through bold and calculated intrigue, Earl Haakon had at last achieved the ambition that had long driven him. He had avenged his father's death, humiliated his foes, and risen to power. Yet for a man of Haakon's restless nature, no triumph could ever be final. The ease at which he had manipulated King Harald Bluetooth and his nephew, using them as mere instruments to serve his own ends, had surely deepened his confidence in his cunning. It was not long before a new ambition took root in his mind, to cast off his allegiance to the Danish crown and rule Norway independently. And soon enough, the opportunity to realise this bold vision revealed itself. In the year 973, Emperor Otto I of Germany, who had long asserted his sovereignty over Denmark, died, and his young son Otto II succeeded him. King Harald Bluetooth saw the emperor's death as an opportunity. He began preparing for war and summoned his vassal Earl Haakon, ordering him to bring all of his forces in support of the campaign. Though his private thoughts remain unknown, Haakon judged it unwise to refuse. In the spring of the year 975, he set sail with a great fleet and a strong army. For a time, he took part in defending Harald Bluetooth's crown, and even secured a notable victory against Otto's forces. With his duty fulfilled, Haakon prepared to return to Norway. But Emperor Otto II was not finished. He once more rallied his troops, crossed the fjord into Jutland, and advanced deep into Danish territory. King Harald responded swiftly, marching his own army to meet the threat. A fierce battle followed, in which the emperor at last gained the upper hand. Though defeated, Harald survived, and with the help of mediators, a truce was reached, and the two rulers agreed to a meeting. There, Harald renewed his oath of vassalage to the emperor, and pledged to bring Christianity to both his own realm and to Norway. Thus, Harald Bluetooth became the first Christian king of Denmark. Soon after, he summoned Earl Haakon and compelled him to accept baptism. The Earl, along with all of his men, were baptized. The king then entrusted him with priests and learned men, commanding that he see to the conversion of the Norwegian people as well. Their business concluded, the two parted ways, and Haakon returned to the sea, there to wait for a favourable wind. When a favourable wind at last arose, Earl Haakon gave the order for all the priests to disembark and return to the shore. With them gone, he set his sails eastward along the coast of Skane in southern Sweden, plundering the land as he went. Haakon was eager to erase the mark of his recent baptism, and he soon performed a great blood sacrifice to win back the favour of the old gods. Standing solemnly, he waited for a sign that Odin looked upon him with approval, and would grant him victory in the war to come. Two ravens would soon appear overhead, circling and croaking loudly. To Haakon, this was a sacred omen. The offering had been accepted, and fortune would now favour him in battle. With fierce resolve, he set fire to his ships, led his warriors ashore, and began a ruthless campaign through the land. Earl Ottar, the ruler of Gotland in southern Sweden, rose to oppose him. A fierce battle ensued, but Haakon emerged victorious. Earl Ottar fell, along with a great number of his men. Following this triumph, Haakon swept across Sweden, leaving fire and ruin in his wake, until at last he crossed into Norway. From there, he marched northward by land all the way to Trøndelag, reclaiming his ancestral seat. A ballad was written about Haakon's blood sacrifice and subsequent triumph in battle. The warrior striding o'er the slain asks of the gods what days will gain. Two ravens flying from the east come croaking to the bloody feast. The warrior knows what they foreshow, the days when Gotland blood will flow. A Viking feast Earl Haakon kept, the land with Viking fury swept, harrying the land far from the shore, where foray ne'er was known before. Leaving the barren cold coast side, he raged through Gotland far and wide, led many a gold-decked Viking shield, o'er many a peaceful inland field. Bodies on bodies Odin found, heaped high upon each battleground. The moor, as if by witchcraft's power, grows green enriched by bloody shower. No wonder that the gods delight to give such luck in every fight. To Haakon's men, for he restores their temple on our Norway shores. According to the History of Norway, after Haakon's battles in Sweden, he lived as an independent sovereign, though for some reason he refrained from assuming the royal title, a king in all but name. Earl Haakon openly defied his overlord King Harald Bluetooth by laying waste to the Viken, a region in Norway over which Harald had established firm control, effectively treating it as an extension of Denmark. In retaliation, Harald unleashed his own fury upon Norway, and both realms descended into chaos. Yet, when Haakon sailed southward with a mighty fleet to confront the Danish king directly, Harald's resolve faltered. Struck by sudden fear, he turned his ships and fled, returning home in disgrace. It was hardly to be expected that Harald Bluetooth would quietly endure such humiliation. Though age had weakened him, he was not without powerful allies. Chief among them were the famed Norse Vikings, a fierce brotherhood of warrior mercenaries who lived solely for battle, sustained by plunder and glory. Determined to punish his rebellious vassal, Harald sought to rouse the Norse Vikings to action. The moment came at a grand funeral feast hosted by their leader, Earl Sigvaldi, in honour of his late father. The hall was brimming with warriors, the ale and mead flowed freely, and the air rang with laughter and boastful tales. When the time came for the ritual toast to Bragi, the god of poetry and oaths, Earl Sigvaldi rose, his cup raised high, and made a solemn vow. Within 3 winters, I will either slay Earl Haakon and drive him from his realm, or perish in the attempt. The Battle of Hjörungavágr soon followed. The Norse Vikings, a fearsome band of warrior mercenaries, advanced slowly along the Norwegian coast with 60 ships, and about 7,000 or 8,000 men, plundering as they went. They were met at Hjörungavágr by Earl Haakon and his sons Eric, Sweyn, Sigurd, and Erling, who commanded a much larger fleet of 180 ships, though many were smaller and less equipped. With an army of over 10,000, this clash was one of the greatest ever seen in the north, with countless heroes, great warriors, and the gods themselves influencing the outcome of the battle. According to the History of Norway, this is how the battle went. As the enemy approached, Haakon arranged his forces, his eldest son Eric on the right, his second-born Sweyn on the left, and he himself in the centre. Young Sweyn soon struggled against the fierce Van Akerson, the best fighter in the Norse Viking order. But Eric came to his aid, driving Van back before racing to hold the line against Bu the Big, another celebrated warrior. The battle grew furious, the air thick with arrows and spears. Haakon, standing boldly at the prow of his ship, had his mail shirt torn to shreds by the onslaught. Then, legend says, Haakon vanished from the fight. He had gone ashore to sacrifice his youngest son Erling to the old gods. After the blood sacrifice, the skies grew black, and a violent hailstorm beat down, pelting the faces of the Norse Vikings, almost blinding them. Some even declared that they saw the maidens of Odin, the Valkyries standing in the prow of Earl Haakon's ship, loosing deadly arrows. Despite the chaos, the Norse Vikings fought on, until their leader Earl Sigvaldi suddenly turned and fled, proclaiming he didn't sign up to fight against pagan sorcerers. Sigvaldi's flight broke the Norse Vikings' morale, and many followed in retreat. Earl Haakon's power was now so firmly established that none dared challenge his rule. The land prospered, harvests were plentiful, the seas bountiful, and the people enjoyed long years of peace and contentment. A poet in Haakon's court wrote this of his rule: "Who before has ever known 16 earls subdued by one? Who has seen all Norway's land, conquered by one brave hero's hand. It will be long in memory held, how Haakon ruled by sword and shield. When tales at the Vikings' mast go round, his praise will every mouth resound. In the year 995, whispers began to circulate through Norway of a king in Ireland, said to be of Norwegian blood. These rumours soon reached the ears of Earl Haakon, who, concerned by their implications, dispatched a trusted agent to Ireland, disguised as a merchant. His mission was to discover whether this man was indeed Olaf Tryggvason, the son of Tryggve Olafsson, the great-grandson of Harald Fairhair, and therefore a legitimate heir to the Norwegian throne. If so, Haakon instructed his man to lure him to Norway, where the Earl could bring him under his control. The spy soon befriended Olaf, and revealed the troubled state of Haakon's rule. Once a revered leader, the Earl had fallen into deep disfavour with the people, largely due to his unchecked desire for women. He often claimed the daughters of noble families as concubines, his supposed right as ruler, but soon discarded them after only a week or two, leaving resentment in his wake. Olaf, intrigued, sailed for Norway to assess the situation for himself. He found the people disillusioned, many expressing a shared wish to see a true descendant of Harald Fairhair reclaim the throne. But they all said, "We know of no one suited for such a task, especially when all efforts against Earl Haakon have failed." Yet, Olaf's arrival gave courage to the discontented. Rebellion soon flared, and the land stirred with hope that a new king might rise. Warned of the uprising, Haakon fled with a small group of retainers and slaves, among them a man named Kark. They escaped by boat into a nearby fjord, and sought refuge at a secluded farm. There, Haakon hid himself in a hole within a pigsty, trusting Kark to guard him. But Olaf and his men were not far behind. Though they found no trace of Haakon, Olaf stood before the gathered folk, and declared that he would richly reward anyone who delivered him Haakon's head. Kark, hearing this from the shadows, was overcome by fear and ambition. That night, as Haakon slept, Kark drove a blade through his throat and severed his head. He brought it to Olaf, expecting praise and reward. Instead, Olaf condemned the act as treachery and had Kark hanged for the murder of his own lord. Thus ended the life of Haakon the Powerful, once the mightiest man in Norway, brought low not by battle, but by betrayal. At a time when the ancient faith was slowly fading and belief in the old gods no longer held sway among the nobility, Earl Haakon remained a devout and steadfast heathen. Even so, the old faith, as events would show, retained enough fervent adherents to make the rise of Christianity a slow and often bloody struggle. Yet certain acts, like the sacrifice of one's own child, shocked even the most devout followers of the Aesir. Though such rites may have belonged to the dim past, by the 10th century they struck many as monstrous relics of a darker age. How much Haakon's religious fanaticism contributed to his downfall is difficult to say. The sacrifice of his son Erling during the battle against the Norse Vikings was widely believed, but it was not the root cause of the rebellion that ended his reign. His true undoing lay in the vices that eroded the popularity he had once enjoyed, failings that transcended religious boundaries. Earl Haakon was the last defender of paganism upon Norway's throne. He was a man of formidable gifts, brave, calculating, and a masterful leader in war. In his early years, he had won admiration for his generosity and good judgment. Yet the power he seized through cunning and strength seemed in time to unbalance him. The dignity he once wore with honor grew into arrogance. Morally, Haakon was a true product of the Old Norse world, a world shaped by constant conflict. In such a harsh and distrustful society, honesty was reserved for allies, while deceit and betrayal were considered fair weapons against foes. Yet Haakon, by failing to distinguish between friend and enemy, betrayed both. He rose through treachery, by killing Golden Harold and manipulating King Harold Bluetooth, and by treachery he fell, murdered by his own slave. With Haakon's death, paganism was largely forgotten in Norway, and Olaf Tryggvason, the new king of Norway, would champion Christianity, and was described as a fanatic. He used forced conversions through means such as exile, hostage-taking, mutilation, torture, and death for those who refused, as well as destroying many pagan temples. Paganism would never return to Norway, and Christianity would soon become the dominant religion, making Haakon the last Norse champion of paganism, and the final ruler of Norway who remained faithful to the old gods. The final poem of Haakon written in the Hemskringla reads, "In Norway's land was never known a braver earl than brave Haakon. At sea beneath the clear moon's light, no braver man sought to fight. 9 kings to Odin's wide domain were sent by Haakon's right hand slain. So well the raven flocks were fed, so well the wolves were filled with dead." I would like to give a huge thank you to all of my members. Your contribution is valuable to the continuation of the channel, and I appreciate you all immensely. A special thank you to John Seitz. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and I'll see you all next week for another History Profile.